Filming from GenCon 2016, I'm here at the booth of Arcane Wonders, where they're presenting a new game called Royals. As you can see, even just the setup of the area where they're presenting it is pretty impressive. And Anthony has agreed to tell us a little bit about this new game. Thank you, Anthony.
No, thank you. Now, the biggest thing with Royals is that it is a territory control gateway type game that for 2 to 5 players. And the biggest thing we look at with Royals is it starts off with the game's played in 3 ages, and it starts off with a very going into it very easily. You're paying cards of colors, and you're paying those cards to influence different nobles within different countries. So France, for example, is blue. Britain is green. Germany, the German states is green. Britain's red, and Spain is yellow. And as you go through, you're paying colors to influence nobles. So it has a very Ticket to Ride feel, where you're just set collection to spend to influence the nobles and gain those territories. But what ends up happening is through the 3 ages of the game, people are paying, and the map starts getting more and more congested. And as the map gets congested, you can't influence the same noble someone else has influenced. So there becomes conflict and struggle over the different victory points. The victory points are the big thing. Is everyone is kind of racing, and there's an urgency to gain the different victory points. So let's say I spent 1 to influence the Marshal in Bordeaux, and I would immediately gain this victory point.
Okay.
It's gone. It's taken off the board. No one else can get that victory point at all. So each of the little markers on the board are all victory points that you can obtain by doing different things. So there are the city victory points, which are obtained by influencing a marshal or a noble within the city. There are then the country victory points, which are gained by the first person and the second person who influence a noble in every single different city. Then but one thing is this: as I influence the marshal here, I'd put a victory point here on the portrait on the side. Now, these are additional victory points scored at the end of the game. Like if I had the most cubes on the marshals, I'd gain 4, and so on all the way through the king to up to 16 points. If there is ever a tie at the end of the game, you would then split the victory points, and each person would get 8 instead of the 16. So we have a very...
Yeah, I was just wondering why the portraits were into 2 different pieces. That's so big that they couldn't fit it in the box. But now I see there's a function to
and
that.
What happens is also if there's a 3-player tie or a 4 or a 5 even, it's a point denial. No one would get those points. So, but if you get a point, one of each of them influenced, you'd get the 16 points. If you got... so that's the beginning part. But then each age, you look at who has the most influence within the countries, and the person with the most influence gets points. So not only are you vying for the different points on the board, but then you're vying for influence and control over each territory during the 3 ages. And you're like, well, what happens when the board is congested and you can't influence the nobles? And that's where going in, it starts building into like a more medium difficulty and a little bit more meatier game with more strategy, because then influence cards come in. And the influence cards show you 2 different countries that you could target. So if you had an influence card, for example, that targeted France, and the white player needed that marshal for whatever reason, they could play this card and pay the cost of the marshal to knock my influence out. My marshal has been replaced by their marshal. Now, they still get influence over the country for the country type scoring, but for means of the end of age influence, you wouldn't gain them at that time. So, as you go on, it becomes a little bit more conflict, a little bit more strategy to your decisions, but it starts off with a very easy light game. So as you're going in, the game becomes more complex and a little bit more more thinky. So we've been really excited about the game. The designer is Peter Hawes, and we've had a wonderful time with Royals so far. So
Yeah, thank you for pointing out that this is a gateway game, because I was completely misled as I was walking by. I thought, oh, this is going to be hardcore, just because it looks like there's a lot going on.
There is a lot on the board, and it looks very congested. But what you find is that it's just the urgency of grabbing all those points and going through. It's really a gateway into a medium difficulty game at most. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much for telling us about Royals. Royals has been released here at GenCon?
It's a pre-release. We did a little bit of pre-release at Origins, and we had it at Dice Tower Con as well. But we have units pre-released now, and they'll be in retail stores at the end of September.
End of September, for common mortals that cannot make it
for
here.
everyone, yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Hey, thank you.